I thinking? Now we're live. Look at that. Hi, everybody. It's time for the pre-show. Today is our Network Plus N10-008 Network Plus study group. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching on the replay, we get started in about, well, in this case, about 9 minutes. And if you are not here on the replay, we still start in 9 minutes. How's that work? I guess there's a whole time thing you can work with on the replay. But it's tough not being here live. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking in. We were able to do a live stream today. It was a little touch and go there for a while, wasn't it? But we are definitely doing a live stream today. All worked out. Good to have you here. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I've got all new Network Plus questions for you, so we're going to do all of that shortly. I think I have the right presentation up this time as well. We weren't sure on that last time either, were we? We did not know. So I think I'm finally in a good place. Oh, boy. We did not know if we would do this. This is a little, this perspective is for really the folks who are on the live stream. This doesn't make much sense if you're watching on the replay. But as we sit here, we've got a hurricane coming into Florida, which is where we are based. That hurricane, fortunately, is not going to affect anything where I am. There were times during the evolution of Ian Miller is the name of the storm. That's its full name. And at one point, it was going directly over the studio. And then, of course, it jogged a little bit. You can kind of see the rain just in the lower part of the storm there. Riverview, Florida, you are in it. So you're doing good. Stay with it. At least you got power. Everybody else in the state of Florida, I hope you have all of your supplies. It's remarkable how much this time people were referring to hurricane supplies as people panicking as they were buying their water and supplies. Thanks. Welcome to Florida. That's not panicking. Someone who went through Andrew, getting water and supplies is not panicking. That's what you're supposed to do. Filling up the tank of your car is not panicking. That's what you're supposed to do. So those of you that went out and did it, congratulations. You've got all of your supplies. You can now get in there and work through that. Why is my aux display now causing me trouble? We'll see how it goes. I may have to take the stream off the secondary. Let's check our things. It is remarkable how many people described it as panicking. I think there are people that maybe haven't gone through a major hurricane before. Major hurricanes are they are nothing to sneeze at. There is a reason to be prepared for these things. And it's not a panic. It's for those of us that grew up in Florida, that's normal. Well, I know you are supposed to have your water. You are supposed to have your supplies at the beginning of hurricane season. They always recommend go out and get your supplies, but we're humans and we don't do that. And we wait until the last minute and then everyone runs out and gets their supplies. I don't think you're going to be able to change that part, but there are a number of us, myself included, that had supplies all ready to go. In my case, don't have to worry about it in this particular run. But the season is not over. It goes until the end of the year. Well, till when? September, October, November? Is it November time frame that hurricane season is over? You think I'd know this. For someone who lives in Florida, hurricane season just never ends. It's always happening. There's always something you're doing to prepare for it. So we'll see. We will see. Does my video for CompTIA still good for this exam? Well, sure. The N10-008 is the latest version. We'll talk about that in the first part of this. You'll get all the details. You'll know what the most recent is and everything else. That's why I always put version numbers on every video. So you can always look at the video and know, is this video for this version of the exam? Oh, yes, it is. You can see it immediately. There's no question. There's no wondering. There's none of that. It's all in the title of the video itself. So always check that title at the top of the page, and you'll be able to see that. Wow. This is... I do have family in Central Florida, other things in Central Florida. How's that looking for them right now? It looks like when it hits the Orlando area, it'll be a Cat 1. So still a healthy hurricane, by the time it gets to the middle of the state, which will be tomorrow. It is moving so slowly. Do I know when I'm doing the next Security Plus Live? Literally tomorrow. I do. And it's always on the calendar. You can always check the calendar on the website or the calendar on Discord. But in this case, it's tomorrow. That's how I know. I worked on it this weekend. So I know all the questions are ready to go. We got about 4 minutes left. I should probably put up my clock so that I know what's going on. What is, there it is. Oh, yeah, we got 2 minutes. 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes to go. Yeah, the Security Plus will be good. All new Security Plus questions. Got those all set up this weekend. And then next week are A+ live streams. So there's a lot of live streaming going on for me right now. It would be better, or at least it would be easier for me if I could simply turn on the live stream and we'd be off to the races. But it takes about half a day to set up the content for the live stream. But if it did not have the content, if it did not have the questions, what good would it be? I think that's kind of the fun part in my mind. So it's time well spent because we can do this live and then people can watch the replay and there's good content. People can learn something from it. And just turning on a live stream and saying, hey, it's your boy, doesn't get you anywhere. That doesn't pass any exams. So we have to give you something you can use to be able to pass these exams. That's the plan. That's the goal. That's the idea. Our poor little laptop over here is, I think it's re-indexing. I did a reboot before doing this, and it gets a little angry at the re-indexing. Although, I wonder if it's something else. Let's see. Where's my utilities? Let's look at our activity. Let's have a look at CPU time. Let's sort by it. Yep, it's the kernel task. Hi, kernel. Let's close that out. Any ETA with the Network Plus practice exams. I would love to have Network Plus practice exams. If there were going to be Network Plus practice exams, they would be available in the coming months. That's the best ETA I can really give you. That's all we got. That's all we got. So we'll work from there. A minute to go. Minute and so to go. And we'll get started with this. Do we have that set up? Cameras are looking good. Recordings, they are going, aren't they? Let's check our recordings. Hey, they are going. Look at that. I could just see them down here. You can see my little Cylons going. Those are the recordings. So that's good. I think we're in good shape. I believe we are. Let's see if we can get a presentation running. I'll always love the green button. Very nice. So with that, I think we're in pretty good. I think we're in pretty darn good. I've got a lot going on. Douglas is in the hurricane. You other folks in Florida, solidarity, my brother. Stay with it. We'll get through it. We'll do this in the meantime. This'll take your mind off of it. Don't worry about all that crazy wind and rain and the slowness and the wind and the rain and the wind and the rain. And there's some wind in there too. Yeah, I would imagine it's going to get a little bit of wind where I am, but nothing. I'm not really going to get anything where I'm located, so we're in good shape. All right. I think it is top of the hour. I think we're ready to get started. Let's see if I can remember how to do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2022 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group we do each month. I've got a study group. I can imagine doing this each week, but right now it's once a month. We do live streams, though, about every week. This week we're doing 2 live streams. So we'll do our Network Plus today, and if you want to come back tomorrow, we'll do a Security Plus study group. I take questions from the Network Plus exam objectives. I put them into this live stream, and we, in real time, can answer the questions and see how everyone does with the knowledge they have of Network Plus. We'll be able to jump around and see just exactly what we can do or what we've learned maybe in the meantime. The way we would do this if you'd like to join along, if you are here live, pop open a new browser window. Go to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. There's a question waiting for you right there. There is also an app you can get for this, because of course there is. It's called the Socrative Student app. Socrative is the service we use to provide that functionality, and there's an app. They have the Student app. Don't get the Socrative Teacher app. That's the one for me. You want to get the Socrative Student app, and if you do that, there's a room name you have to put in. Make sure you spell it right. Professor Messer, all one word, is the room name, PROFESSOR, and if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you. We call this our rewind question because it's a question from last month, just to see how well you remember any of these. The question asks, which of the following would provide the best metrics of VoIP call quality? Would it be duplex, jitter, temperature, link status, or speed? Now, if you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to use the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to be able to answer this question. And if you think you know what the question is, answer it right there. Again, no hints in the chat room, no answers in the chat room. We will figure this out together. Please lock in your answer. We'll come back to that question in just a bit. Thanks for being here. We do one of these, as I mentioned, every month for Network Plus. When we're not here doing a live stream, you can, of course, visit our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube, where you will somehow be compelled to subscribe to the channel. I don't know how that works, but I would really appreciate it if you gave that a shot. Also, we have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter, and a pretty picture version of it at professormesser.com/Instagram. Some folks asked in the pre-show if the videos that are online are videos that are applied to this particular Network Plus version. And yes, they are. For English-speaking countries, the current version of the Network Plus is the N10-008. This was an exam that was released in September of 2021, last year. It's been almost exactly a year since that exam has been released, and we expect this exam to still be around into March of 2025. So if you are here in 2022 and you're working towards your certification and you're working on the N10-008, then you're working on the right exam. That is the correct one. Make sure that you have all of the study materials and everything that you're using and the objectives. You see the link on your screen. Make sure that all of those are referencing the N10-008. Also let you know that everything that you can see in my video course is available online. You can watch it for free. Every minute of every video is available for you to stream and be able to watch as long as you have an internet connection. I realize not everyone has that type of internet connection, so there are downloadable versions of the videos that you can purchase. You can also purchase MP3 audio versions, my course notes, my exam hacks ebook. It all gets bundled together in my Success Bundle. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. And if you just need course notes or you just need audio, you can, of course, buy those separately as well. There's also a video replay of this available immediately after we are done here on the YouTube. You can also get an audio-only podcast version of this available by visiting professormesser.com/podcast. I have to edit and put that together, so usually it takes a day or so for me to get that done, but everything is in that podcast link. And if you have a podcast listening program, you can find all the links on that page to add our RSS feed, and then the podcast simply becomes downloaded automatically in your podcast app. So that makes it very, very easy. That is a good place to go. If you go to YouTube about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, will have a listing of all of the timestamps for the video. She's watching the replay right now. Hey, Lori, how you doing? How's the hurricane over there? She's in a different part of Florida. So hopefully things will work out okay for her as well. The questions and answers and other things that we do are all time-stamped here, so you can find exactly what you are looking for. When we are not here live, we're usually hanging out in our chat. You'll find us on Discord at professormesser.com/Discord, and you'll find invitations on my website either by typing in professormesser.com/Discord. There it is. Or you can go to my homepage, and in the upper right, there's an icon there for professormesser.com/Discord. It all goes to the same place, and that will certainly get you to where you need to be on that on the Discord chat. We're always hanging in there and doing something. There's usually some type of activity, and certainly lots of people can help answer your questions about any of these CompTIA exams. Also let you know that eventually you will need to get a voucher so that you can purchase and take your exam. Well, the vouchers can be purchased directly from Pearson VUE at their full retail price, but there is an opportunity to get a voucher at a discounted price directly from the Professor Messer website, a website that you can trust. Simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and you can get a discounted voucher if you're in the U.S. or Canada or a U.S. territory. Currently, we don't have vouchers for other parts of the world. Hopefully, we'll be able to fix that here someday soon. Also, if you purchase the voucher from my site, not only do you get a voucher, you also get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote with a number of exam hacks, sort of life hacks for an exam. And the life hacks are there to help you study, and they'll even give you some tips on how you can optimize your time and efforts during the exam. Maybe you can make a few more extra points on your exam just by reading through this Exam Hacks ebook. That Exam Hacks ebook only available if you buy a voucher or you buy my Success Bundle. You can't buy it separately. So this may be a good piece of information that you're able to use. Find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's now go back to that question I asked earlier, which is, which of the following would provide the best metrics of VoIP call quality? And I gave you a number of different options. You had duplex, jitter, temperature, link status, and speed. Let's see how you answered this one. We'll plug it in. This is a very different set of responses than I got last month. So hopefully those of you that were on the last stream, you now remember some of the things we talked about regarding voice over IP, because 56% of you said jitter. 19% said duplex. We have 16% that said speed. And then we're into single digits with 9%, 8% for link status, and 1% for temperature. Well, if we go with the majority, that would be jitter, is what everybody was talking about. 56% of you said jitter would be the thing that you would look for in voice over IP quality. And indeed, that is one of the first things we look for if we're dealing with a streaming media or real-time media troubleshooting. We often want to get information about the jitter associated with that real-time stream. That's because we're hoping that these packets will arrive on the network in regular intervals. One thing that Ethernet, although Ethernet is fantastic and it has been our networking standard for so many years, but there's no mechanism in Ethernet to guarantee the delivery of certain information at a certain amount of time. And since that guarantee doesn't exist, we need to now somehow measure how badly or how good our connection might be to receive that all in a regular timestamp. The problem, of course, with real-time audio or real-time video is that if you miss it, you can't really rewind it and keep moving. You've got a conversation that you're having with someone. You can't just stop the conversation, rewind it back a little bit, and then listen to it again. You instead have to go through the process of simply dealing with what you missed and maybe having someone, could you say that again? You don't want to be in that situation. So instead, we want to watch the traffic as it's coming through the network. Hopefully, it's coming in very regular intervals. That's what we would like to see. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be regular. The problem is when you'd have a network that has a lot of contention or has other issues that you need to deal with, you might get larger gaps between these frames. And in that situation, you have a larger amount of jitter, and that can certainly cause problems if you're trying to communicate with someone. Jitter is an important statistic to measure. It's one that we usually will look at first if we're dealing with real-time audio or video, and that's why in this particular case, jitter, answer B, was indeed the correct answer, and 58% of you got that one absolutely correct. Hopefully you were able to remember that from last month. And if you didn't, maybe you just knew it. You didn't have to remember all of this. And that's good, because all of this information that's on this page, duplex, jitter, temperature, link status, and speed, are all listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with all of those. Now, that's a good question. How do you measure that jitter? Do you look for blocks? Do you get a magnifying glass and see how many blocks are going through your screen? No, you don't. In most cases, you have to have either software that is specifically designed to measure that value on the screen. Sometimes you can get a very simplified jitter measurement tool that you can have on someone's desktop, or perhaps even better, get a packet capturing device, use Wireshark, use a sniffer, use some type of protocol analysis tool to be able to capture the packets, because it will tell you exactly the number of milliseconds between these frames as they're going by. From my perspective, you really can't get better than a protocol analysis tool. Those protocol analyzers tell you everything about what's going on. That would be one of the best ways to measure jitter if you are in that particular situation. So that gets us into some newer questions. We, of course, did our older questions just now. That was our rewind question. But as you're probably aware, on the Network Plus exam, the first series of questions you get, usually it's the first handful of questions that you'll see, are not multiple choice based questions. The one we just looked at, that's a multiple choice question, where you get a question and then there are multiple choices to choose from. In fact, if you did know the answer, you still had a 20% chance of getting it right. Well, CompTIA knows this, and what they want to do is give you questions that are not multiple choice. They are performance-based questions, is what they call them. And what that really means, it's a question that just isn't multiple choice. It could be fill in the blank. It could be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. It could be a matching question. There could be drag and drop. It might be putting things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. We just don't know exactly what the question will look like, but there are some standards that we can expect to see on the exam. So I have for you a brand new performance-based question of the month, and here is our question. This question asks, from the command line, identify the MAC address of the default gateway. This may require multiple commands. That's what I want you to be able to do, is to be able to show me the MAC address of the default gateway. And you can see here there is a command prompt there, and I specifically even said in that it is a Windows command line. So that should give you some ideas of what to work through. While you're answering that question, I want to thank Jasper in the chat room with the £10 super chat. Jasper, thank you. He says, thank you, Professor Messer. Passed my Security Plus last week. Congratulations on your Security Plus. That is a crazy exam. It's a crazy, huge exam to go through. So the process of studying for that one is massive, and passing a Security Plus exam has got to feel good after going through all that. Congratulations, Jasper, on the Security Plus certification, and thank you so much for your £10 super chat as well. We sure appreciate that. This question, I'll redirect you back to this one, this command line question. Usually on the exam, there will be a command line that will be interactive, and you can type in the command line to be able to answer this question. In this case, we don't have an interactive command line, but you can put in the command itself what we're trying to do here. What 2 commands would you use? Or 3? Maybe you could do 4. Sometimes you could do 1. But I think most people will probably do 2 commands to make this one work. That's the only hint I'll give you, is 2 commands is what I think you should be able to do. So hopefully you know this one. Plug in your answer. Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in that answer. I'll now open that up for your answers. Feel free. That's a fill in the blank. So you've got the options there to put in all of those different commands. Should be able to see this as we're going through. This is a good example of what you might do to be able to troubleshoot these. This is a very common thing to do as well. So imagine sitting down at a computer. You've never been on this computer before. They're complaining of a particular issue, and you need to understand the MAC address of that default gateway. You're trying to make sure that the default gateway that you're using really is the correct one. Maybe you have multiple gateways on that particular network, and you want to confirm what it happens to be. Some of you are putting in one command. Some of you are putting in multiple commands. Some of you are putting in a single command that may or may not get us to where we need to go. I'm going to try to do this in real time as a demo on this. So let me see if I can get my command line running on here. And I want to see if I've got everything listed on here. I do. And I'm going to show you what I'm able to do with this particular command once we get to this point. Make sure you plug in your answer. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to lock in what you think the answer might be. And then we'll try to figure this out ourselves as we go through this list. Some other folks in the chat room are in South Florida. I imagine it is pretty windy. We're going to get a lot of rain here in Florida over the next couple of days. It's a normal, I don't want to say too normal, but we sort of expect it. Sort of expect the hurricanes this time of year. It's kind of normal for us to think about it. We obviously don't want the hurricane. It can go away. We're done with it now. It's all fun and games until the hurricane hits, and then you have to work through all of the rain and the wind and everything else. It does look like it's going to hit as a Category 4, although it's a very high Category 4. I would not be surprised if later on they decide it really was Category 5. That's something they tend to do after the fact, is they go back through their statistics and they're able to determine, actually, we weren't quite correct on this one. After looking at things on the ground and other data sources, they might say, well, it really was a Cat 4. They may decide it was a Cat 5. Either way, that's a bad storm. Anything that's a Cat 3 and above is just a very, very bad storm. We'll have to see what happens with that. I wasn't going to talk too much about the storm because I know a lot of people watching the replay next week will already know the results of this. So I apologize, but it killed a lot of good time while we were waiting. Let's see what your answers, though, might have been. From the Windows command line, identify the MAC address of the default gateway. This may require multiple commands. Let me show you how I did it on my computer. Let me see if I can bring up a Windows desktop here. Let's flip over to it. There we go. So here's a Windows desktop. Now, the MAC address of the default gateway. I didn't really want to make that full screen, but here we are in the big mix of things. That's what we're dealing with on my computer right now, is me perhaps incapable of using a mouse for some reason. The challenges that you're going to find, though, is by default, your computer is not going to know the details of this particular it's not going to know the details of what the MAC address is of a default gateway. So let's try to look at a default gateway configuration and see what we're able to do with it. The first thing I'm interested in knowing, the way that you would see the default gateway is to use or at least a MAC address of the default of any remote device. It doesn't have to be the default gateway. It's easy to find our own MAC address. In fact, on Windows, ipconfig shows you a number of different interface information, but this is all layer 3. You can see IPv6 and IPv4 here. You'd have to use ipconfig/all, and it will list out for you your MAC address. And in fact, in this case, you can see that I'm on a virtual machine. It shows it's the parallel virtual IO Ethernet adapter, and there's the MAC address of my local machine. But that wasn't the question. The question is, what was the MAC address of the default gateway? And you'll see also on here, there is a default gateway listed under the ipconfig statistics, but the default gateway is listed with its IP address, which in this case is 10.211.55.1. Well, that doesn't give me a MAC address. That doesn't answer the question we were hoping to answer. There is a great command on your computer that will show you the cache of all of the address resolution protocol entries that have been made for IPv4, the ARP cache. And the way you would look at the ARP cache in Windows is to perform an ARP-A. And this will show us a list of all of the devices that we've communicated with over the last, I think in Windows, the default is 60 seconds. Once 60 seconds goes by and we've not communicated to that device again, it falls off the list of things. And you can see if my default gateway was 10.211.55.1, you can see that ARP-A already has an entry for 10.211.55.1, and the MAC address, therefore, of my default gateway would be 001 Charlie 42000018. Now, if you perform an ARP-A and you're able to, and you notice that it's not listed there. In fact, I'm going to clear my ARP cache with an ARP-D because I happen to be running, you may have noticed, added administrator prompt so I could do that quickly. You can't do the ARP-D. And notice, well, I didn't do it fast enough. It still came up. There's something else on this computer that is going through and listing that. Well, you can see it's not listed. Now, ARP-A, I caught it. So the ARP cache has one single address inside of it. If you're in this situation and it's not showing you the ARP cache for that IP address, then we need to communicate to that IP address. And a very good way to do that, something as easy as a ping. So let's ping 10.211.55.1. It'll perform the ping, at which time behind the scenes it's done the ARP process, and now we've added that ARP to the list, 10.211.55.1, and there is the MAC address. So in my case, it was a single command I could have run, ARP-A, but you may run into a case where you have to perform first the IP config, so you know what the default gateway is, and then you can at least look at your ARP cache to see if it's in there. And if it isn't, you may have to do a third command to have some type of communication on the network to that IP, and then finally look at the ARP cache again. So this may be a four-step process to finally get you that particular value. And that answers that question. In fact, here's a summary of that information that you can see right here, where I perform the IP config. We're able to look at that information and have that there. In this case, it would not be, well, technically speaking, you could use netstat, because netstat in many operating systems will provide you with a way to look for the ARP cache. In Linux and in Windows, there is probably quite a number of options you could use to do this. In Windows, I'm not even sure. The challenge you have is every operating system has a different number of flags for netstat. But you can probably find a netstat for routing tables, for ARP caches. It depends on the operating system you're using and the functionality for the netstat utility that you have available. But that may be a good option as well. I think ARP is the easiest one, though. Takes you right to the issue. We're in Windows. We know that ARP-A exists. That is the best one to use in this particular case. But of course, you may find a number of different commands that do a similar thing. Is there a command to broadcast on the network as to populate the ARP table so that you can get all the IP addresses and MAC addresses on the network? There are. In fact, if you were going to do that, probably the easiest way is just to use Nmap. Nmap is a remarkably powerful tool. It can easily provide you with a list of IP addresses and MAC addresses. I will caution you that Nmap can also create problems on networks. It can bring devices down if you perform certain scans on those devices. And so I highly recommend that if you're going to use something like Nmap, that it's only on your network, or it's on a network where you have express permission to be able to scan that network, because you can bring down very important services on a corporate network very, very easily with Nmap. You want to be very careful about that. So that is the challenge. Hopefully, this is something you were able to work through using the ARP command in conjunction with other commands to be able to find the MAC address of the default gateway. A number of you gave me the first command, which was ipconfig.all, but that's going to give me my local MAC address, not the MAC address of the default gateway. Normally, we don't know the MAC addresses of these other devices unless we look at our ARP cache. That's really the best way to do it. And obviously, this default gateway in ARP itself is only available in IPv4. IPv6 is a whole different set of things that you would want to do. Is there a particular reason that Nmap brings these systems down? There is. Most of the time, the systems are not prepared for the type of data that Nmap is sending to those systems. It doesn't know how to interpret them, and whoever wrote the IP stack for that device and the the mechanism that they use to examine the traffic that's coming in, didn't consider that we were going to send one of these crazy frames that Nmap is able to do. Quite honestly, Nmap is one of these commands that can send things that normally you'd never see on a network. So someone would have to have already thought about the idea of using Nmap to make that happen. That is your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's giving you some insight into things you can do with the command line. And of course, some of the commands that are available to you that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I have more questions for you. There's always more questions. Here's your next question on the list. This question asks, a user is connecting to a corporate office using an HTML5 VPN client. Which of the following would best describe this type of connection? Would it be RDP, IPsec, VDI, out-of-band, or clientless? A user is connecting to a corporate office using an HTML5 VPN client. Which of the following would best describe this type of connection? Is it RDP, IPsec, VDI, out-of-band, or clientless? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. A couple of things. First, in the chat room, thank you, Defense2100, for the $9.99 super chat. No message, just sharing the love, I guess. Thank you so much for your support of what we do here. Every single penny helps keep this crazy experiment going. So thank you so much for your support of that. And thank you for being here on the live stream as well. Folks in the chat room wondering about Nmap. Sounds like Nmap's kind of dangerous, because Nmap is kind of dangerous. And it says, so Nmap can cause a denial of service. Oh, yes. Yes, yes. Oh, sure. Although, to be fair, almost anything can cause a denial of service if you do it the right way. You can use your web browser and create a denial of service. You can use ping and perform a denial of service. And thank you so much for putting messages into the chat room that would cause a denial of service. Probably not the best idea to be able to do that. So that can hopefully get you through the idea of what do you do in that scenario. Nmap is a bad one. Just make sure you know what you are doing. And I no longer publish a book on Nmap, but I had a book I wrote that went through every single Nmap scan. It provided a packet capture of every single Nmap scan, and then stepped through the packet capture to describe what was happening during that scan. I just did not keep that up to date, so it's no longer published, but that's a fun one to do. If you're ever trying to figure out Nmap, perform an Nmap scan, at the same time capture all of that data using Wireshark, and then look at the packet capture to see what was it doing? What's the difference between a SYN scan and a TCP scan? So there's your homework. What is the difference between a SYN scan and a TCP scan? I don't mean broadly. I mean at the packet level, what's the difference? What packets are done differently with a SYN scan, S-Y-N, that are different than a TCP scan? And then keep going for the other 20 or 25 scans that Nmap has. I think that's your challenge, is breaking through all of those. Let's see how you did with this question, though. This one asked about a user connecting to a corporate office using an HTML5 VPN client. Which of the following would best describe this type of connection? Is it RDP, IPsec, VDI, out-of-band, or clientless? Let's show the results and see how we did. You know, it's weird that the question asked or described us as using an HTML5 VPN client, which technically is correct, but we also described this as being clientless, and 34% of you chose clientless. You can see also here we have an HTML5 VPN client, and 36% of you, which was actually the higher number, said the answer is actually IPsec is what's going on there. 14% said RDP and 10% said VDI. So 4 of our 5 answers are in the double-digit category. And then we have 5% that said, oh, out-of-band. Out-of-band is what we would use. Well, out-of-band is not. If we're connecting over Ethernet with this HTML5 client, it's definitely not out-of-band. But HTML5 is an interesting one to be able to work through. We use the term, if you have never heard HTML5, or you've probably heard HTML, the hypertext transfer language. This is the markup language version 5 of HTML. HTML is used and associated with web browsers. So how does web browser translate to a VPN? There's something in the middle there that we need to figure out. One of the things about HTML5 is they added additional functionality to the things you can do in a web browser. And one of the most significant changes from a security perspective is there are new application programming interfaces that they added. One that is a web cryptography API. Oh, well, this web cryptography I've heard of. Now we're in the mode of encrypting data and decrypting data, and that certainly fits into the world of VPNs. So if I can do that in a browser, why don't I create a web page that has all of the functionality that would normally have in a separate installable VPN client that I would have to run a setup program and maintain on my machine? It takes up space on my hard drive or my SSD. It spends a lot of that time, and then if something breaks, I have to reinstall it. It's a mess. So this is really great. This is now I can create a VPN tunnel in my browser without installing a VPN client on my computer. That's why we call it clientless. It's kind of a shortcut. It's VPN clientless. But we still, of course, have a browser. The browser effectively now becomes our new VPN client. Although it's not a VPN client, it's a browser. It's this weird world that we're kind of meshing these things together. This is a very interesting scenario because now I can simply load up my browser, connect to my office, my corporate office, through the browser, and now I have a VPN. That's it. It's brilliant. It's fast. It's simple. It's easy to support. Really quite well. If you're in a situation where you're trying to get everyone in an organization, let's say you have 1,000 users in the field, how do you roll out software to 1,000 users? Well, you have to set up a package. Maybe they install it during a login. Maybe you already have a software distribution tool that you use. You install it to all these machines. Oh, and then next week, there's an update to the client. All right, let's create a new package. I'll reinstall it on everybody's machine. Oh, but wait, we can't reinstall it on people's machines until they update the server on our... Do you see the problem? Having a client on a machine, it has quite a bit of overhead associated with it. But what if they just open their browser and they were able to connect to the VPN? That's it. That's all you need. These clientless VPNs are brilliant. And indeed, if it's HTML5 as a VPN client, it is certainly going to be considered clientless. So 36% of you chose that option, and indeed it is clientless. There's no client in there. The browser itself, everything that goes to the browser uses that VPN. Now, obviously, this is not the same as having a client on your computer. If you have other software that's running outside the browser, it would have to be specifically written to use the browser to be able to do that VPN. But fortunately, the way this usually works is you open up your HTML5 VPN client, it connects to a server that's on your corporate network, and from there you're able to launch different apps. So you sort of have everything take over from that point. We had same number of people, 36% of you chose IPsec. And although it certainly is possible to create an IPsec tunnel in a browser, that is not generally the type of VPN that's used for end-user access. Most of the time we refer to these two different types of VPNs. If you have users that are connecting to a VPN concentrator, we often will use SSL to be able to do that. Technically, of course, it's TLS, but we still use the term SSL sort of as a way to simplify the conversations that we can have with folks. SSL is just so quick and easy to say. An SSL VPN doesn't need any special ports open. It goes through practically any firewall because it's using the same protocol and port number as the SSL or TLS protocol that we use to communicate securely to websites. IPsec is a completely different set of protocols, has its own set of port numbers, in some cases frames that we have to deal with. Not quite as friendly when you have to go through multiple firewalls to make that happen, and indeed a little more complex to set up and keep running, which is why most of the time our end user VPNs are using SSL VPNs. So in this case, running an HTML5 VPN client, the best description in this list is clearly clientless. IPsec would not be the best way to describe the connection because indeed it may not even be an IPsec VPN, maybe an SSL VPN. So not the best way to describe this. In fact, it would be rather unusual to see IPsec inside of our browser. Most of the time we're using SSL to make that happen. We have other options that were here, not quite as popular though. RDP, the remote desktop protocol, certainly allows us to have remote access to a device, but it's not a VPN, doesn't happen in the browser, needs its own client most of the time. And so 13% of you not quite on the mark with the remote desktop protocol. Great for remote desktop, however, great for remote access to a device, just no VPN capabilities. We also have VDI, the virtual desktop interface is a way to almost effectively duplicate that remote desktop functionality, except on a much larger scale. VDI does not provide inherently any type of VPN. So that's not what we would be using inside of HTML5. There may be an HTML5 VDI client or VDI software, and that would be, of course, an appropriate response for that one. But in this case, we're talking about a VPN. And then lastly, out of band. Out of band means we're not even using the network. We wouldn't be using the connection that's on our Ethernet connection. We'd probably be using some other type of connection that would not be going through our browser. This out-of-band connectivity does not have anything to do with an HTML5 VPN connection, however. So that is this question. The best answer, the one by far, is answer E, clientless. 36% of you got that one right. And HTML5 is what allows us to simply open up our browser, connect to the VPN, and have no additional software installed on our computer. Let's do another question. I've got one here. This is Network Plus. So let's do Network Plus question. This one asks, a network administrator needs to confirm the DNS configuration associated with an email server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be dig, traceroute, ARP, nmap, or TCP dump? I'm going to see how many people were listening earlier. A network administrator needs to confirm the DNS configuration associated with an email server. Which of the following would provide this information? Is it dig, traceroute, ARP, nmap, or TCP dump? If you think you know the answer, use this link, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See what it happens to be. I want to go back as Spud in the chat room with the €10 super chat, sitting Network Plus in the morning. Any last minute advice? Thanks for all the help. Whenever you get into the last, I would say the last week of your studies, one of the best things that you can do is to grab the exam objectives and use those as a checklist. Just start going through the objectives. And if you can cross out every bullet that is listed in those exam objectives, and by crossing out the bullet, I mean you're able to explain to someone else what this technology is, how it works, what the primary advantages are, maybe what the disadvantages might be. You can give someone an overview as far as the context of the exam is considered. I would think then you'd be able to cross that one off your list. There are a lot of bullets on the Network Plus exam objectives. That's why I say you probably want to start a week ahead. The benefit of doing that, of course, is that you'll get to a bullet and then you won't know what that one is. So you can circle that one, or you can grab your book, you can grab the videos, you can watch that particular topic. It's easy to find in the videos because the numbering of the objectives matches the numbering of the videos. You can find exactly what you need, get an overview of that topic. Okay, cross it off the list and keep going. So if there's any place where you're looking to understand where you might not be, you may not have the knowledge you need for that particular topic, it'll tell you immediately. You'll know instantly if that happens to be the situation. So that is a very good one to use. I think that would be some of the best things you can do is use those exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know. The exam sticks very closely to the objectives. They very, very rarely go off of that list of objectives, regardless of what you may hear other people say. They stick to those objectives very, very carefully, which is why I often tell people, if you know everything listed in the objectives, you're going to pass your exam. It's really that simple. That's the formula. Go through everything listed in the exam objectives. If you know all of that, you're fine. You will occasionally run into people in the world, on the internet, and in fact, even other books or training materials that will try to teach you things that are outside the scope of the objectives. Of course, it's always interesting to learn something new that is technical, but our goal here is to pass the Network Plus exam. Don't waste your time on topics that go outside the list of objectives. They're not going to be on your exam. Stick to the objectives and you're just fine. That is my last minute advice. Spud, best of luck with your exam, and thank you so much for the 10-year super chat as well. We sure appreciate it. Let's see how we did with this question. This question asked, a network administrator needs to confirm the DNS configuration associated with an email server. Which of the following would provide this information? Is it DIG, traceroute, ARP, Nmap, or TCP dump? What did we answer? Well, 45% of us say it's DIG. That's what we would use. 22% of us said Nmap, because we talked about Nmap all this time. 14% said ARP. 10% said traceroute. And 8% said TCP dump. That is the list. If we go with the plurality of you, we did not get a majority, but we did get a plurality, a very strong one, 45%, which is 20 points higher than any other answer. The answer indeed is DIG, D-I-G. The DIG command. It's not a command I made up. That's a real command. The DIG command is one that's available to use that allows us to send queries to a DNS server and get a response from that DNS server. If you're in Windows, the default for this is NSLOOKUP. So similar functionality. And indeed, it almost has exactly the same results because we're querying a DNS server and getting the results. NSLOOKUP and DIG effectively performing similar types. We see a move away from NSLOOKUP, especially on the Linux side and Mac OS side, and a lot of those platforms are using DIG as the choice. There is a way that you can get DIG installed in Windows. In fact, I have a video on how to install DIG in Windows 10, which is the same way you can do it on Windows 11. Although the ISC is no longer creating a pre-built executable for DIG in their latest distributions, you can still install one of the older distributions which do have the DIG executable inside of them, and it's very clear on the ISC website exactly where that might be. They tell you exactly what versions are available for that. I think DIG's a nice utility to have. I think you should have it installed on your Windows machine. There's a lot of good stuff that you can find through DIG, and I think it's an easier interface to work with. And indeed, since our email server details are on that public DNS server, which of course we would want them to be so that people would know where to send us email, DIG becomes a very powerful tool to be able to do troubleshooting. And in fact, in this case, that's exactly the tool you should use is DIG. 23% of you said Nmap. There's nothing specifically in Nmap that can give us a list of DNS configuration information because it doesn't query and provide results of the query in the same way that DIG or NSLOOKUP might do. And Nmap might be able to tell us what ports are open on that particular server, and perhaps in the world someone has written an Nmap script, because you can extend the functionality of Nmap with Lua scripts. Perhaps somebody has written a script on how to do queries of a DNS server. That would not surprise me at all, since there's so much good, valuable information inside of those DNS servers. It would just make sense that someone would have some type of script that can extend the functionality of Nmap, but that's not our first choice, and probably not the best choice for something like this when DIG and NSLOOKUP are so much easier, and they're already available and working to be able to make that happen. Traceroute is very good at providing us with a list of routers that may exist between 2 points. So between our machine and another device on the network, what routes do we go through? And Traceroute provides us with those details. We've already looked at ARP. We know that ARP, the Address Resolution Protocol, that command can show us all of the entries inside of our ARP table. And that doesn't help us at all at confirming DNS information or tell us anything about an email server. And then lastly, 8% of you said TCP dump, which is a great tool for capturing packets directly from the network. In fact, you can save those as a file, open them up in Wireshark or in a sniffer. But TCP dump, capturing packets, doesn't tell us anything about email server configurations on a DNS server. We wouldn't use that either. The best option here is indeed option A. The dig command is what you would use. That's what I would recommend you have a look at if you're trying to do any type of query or understand what the configuration might be on a DNS server. Well, as you can tell, we've already talked about so many different topics. We're just getting started. There are so many details inside of the Network Plus exam. And in fact, if you look at my course, there are 93 videos in my Network Plus course. That's a lot of videos, over 14 hours of content. And I recognize not everybody has the ability to go through and watch that much video. There may be a few that you have to skip over, or maybe you're only able to hit a certain number of videos, 1 or 2 or 3. But everything that's in the rest of the videos, there's valuable information inside of every single video. So you may want to have a look at my course notes. My course notes are a PDF or printed document. Here's the printed version. It's a real book. It's exactly the same whether it's printed or whether it's the PDF version, but this gives you information directly from the exam. So all of the text, all of those great charts, all of those detailed diagrams, they are in these course notes, and you can follow along as you go through every video. You'll notice the video name is right at the top of the section, and I even have an index in here. So if you wanted to go to the section on password attacks, we can simply click that and it takes you to the page on password attacks. So this is a comprehensive list, and you can see it's 74 pages of information. So that can give you an idea just how much detail is in that exam. Have a look at the course notes. They may be able to help you. It's also a great way to support the website. You can find out more on my site, professormesser.com/NPCN or Network Plus course notes. Let's do another question. This next question, I know you love port numbers, so let's do a port number question. This one asks, a network administrator has enabled UDP 514 on a firewall. Which of the following is allowed through the firewall? Is it encrypted terminal communication, voice call signaling, logs from switches and routers, remote control of a desktop, or secure directory access? A network administrator has enabled UDP 514 on a firewall. Which of the following is allowed through the firewall? Is it encrypted terminal communication, voice call signaling, logs from switches and routers, remote control of a desktop, or secure directory access? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to follow that link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The chat room's having a big argument right now about what OSI layer a network interface card exists at. And I would say that half of you have it right and half of you are wrong. That's the beauty. That's because half of them are choosing OSI layer 1 and the other are choosing OSI layer 2. Stick around for the after show. I'll tell you exactly what the right answer is and why I think that's the right answer. And then we can all fight about it because it's the internet. It's what we do. So that's the beauty of the internet, is we can have conversations. I mean, arguments about what we want to do. We almost accomplish nothing sometimes. I would not put it between layers. I think it solidly fits on a particular layer. But you have to, this is another good example on these exams, and this is a good question that we have here on the port question, is you have to know more than just, is it OSI layer 1 or OSI layer 2? You have to explain why. Why would you put it into a particular category? Why isn't it OSI layer 3? Why is it not OSI layer 4? I mean, doesn't everything go through our adapter cards? Would it be OSI layer 7? See how you can quickly go down this crazy tunnel. You don't want to be dealing with that. So chat room's already there. It's layer 7. Well, that's the thing we have. So we'll talk more about that in the after show. Stick around for that. That happens at the top of the hour. We'll go through the after show, answer questions from you directly from the chat room. I'll stick around for an hour and we'll do something like that. Should be pretty good. Let's see how you did with this one. This question asked, a network administrator has enabled UDP 514 on a firewall. Which of the following is allowed through the firewall? Is it encrypted terminal communication, voice call signaling, logs from switches and routers, remote control of a desktop, or secure directory access? And let's see how you answered. We'll show the results. 40%, 40, say it's logs from switches and routers. So we have still very solid numbers across the board. 28% said voice call signaling. 13% said secure directory access. 11% said encrypted terminal communication. And 9%, almost 10%, said remote control of a desktop. So a very good example of a lot of different options that a lot of people are bundling into this. This is one of the challenges, I think, of the exam is a lot of people will memorize port numbers and the name of the protocol associated with the port number, but they'll forget to memorize what that does. And CompTIA really doesn't care so much if you memorize the port number and the protocol. That's not what they're after. It's important, of course, that you know that, but that's not the information they're hoping you know. What they want is that you understand what type of data uses that port number and protocol. What is using UDP 514? And so I think this question is a very good one to use for something like this. The idea of trying to do memorization of port numbers can be just painful. I get it, because there are a lot of port numbers on this Network Plus exam. Fortunately, it's a finite group. It's only so many. It's not going to go beyond that. And there's a lot of different kind of ports that you would use. In this case, a UDP 514 would be most associated with syslog. And if you know that 514 is syslog, there's not much you have to memorize about what that does. It has log in the name. It's a standard for sending log information between devices. I mean, imagine all of these different and very diverse networking devices that we have on our networks. We have switches, routers, firewalls, VPN concentrators. We have network analysis tools. We have servers. We have workstations. All of these, by the way, could be made by completely different manufacturers and very often are. So how could we possibly take all of the knowledge that's being gathered on these devices through logs and get them all back to one central facility in a standardized way? Well, fortunately, everyone who makes these devices is able to integrate syslog functionality, and syslog is a very well-known standard for being able to send log information across the network. Usually we're sending this log information to a syslog receiver or syslog collector. Sometimes this is a single service, or sometimes it's integrated into a much larger device called a SIEM, a Security Information and Event Manager. SIEM, we just call it a SIEM. And if you do have a SIEM, if you've done anything with SIEMs, you will know that you need a lot of log space. Because imagine sending all of the log information from every switch, every router, every firewall. The firewall itself logs everything by default. You of course, can control exactly what's sent across the network, and you can control how much of the log file is sent. But almost everybody wants everything sent across the network via syslog using the protocol UDP 514. That is exactly where you want to be. Syslog with the 514 means that answer C, logs from switches and routers, would be exactly what we were hoping to do. And 41% of you said, yep, that's what you would use as well. So there are a number of different options if you're trying to figure out how to move some of this data around. There are tons of SIEMs. And if you happen to look at some of the security, I know this is the Network Plus study group, but if you look at both network and security positions that are out there, a lot of those positions really want you to be very familiar with logs, and using a SIM if at all possible, because that's how common a SIM might be on the to be able to use. And I think if you're someone who is you're trying to get a job and maybe you'd like to download a SIM from the internet. There's a lot of really good ones. I think Splunk has a free version you can run. Load up Splunk, take data from a server that you've configured. It could be a Windows server, and have it send logs to the SIM using syslog, just so you can get a feel for what that might be. Now, we have other options in here. We had 26% of you said voice call signaling. And of course, voice call signaling could take a number of different protocols that you might use. The ones that are listed in the exam are specifically SIP protocols, which would be TCP 5060 and 5061. SIP is the session initiation protocol. It is one that is a call management tool. So it's able to send messages across the network so that you can call other devices. Voice call signaling not using that UDP 514. Other options in here, encrypted terminal communication, that would be SSH, TCP 22. That's clearly not what we were looking for. Remote control of a desktop, the remote desktop protocol would be a good example of that. So if we were running Windows and we needed to connect to a Windows device across the network, we were using TCP 3389 using RDP, the remote desktop protocol. And then secure directory access, commonly LDAP or LDAP-S would be something we would use for that. LDAP-S using TCP 636. That's not UDP 514. The one we were looking for is indeed logs from switches and routers, and 42% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that has everything you need to be able to have 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. So I think there's a good option there, but you have to follow these directions to be able to do this. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. The Contact Us link brings up a screen that asks you for your name, your email address, a subject line, and in the subject line, please put Network Plus Study Group, September 2022, or something like that, so I know exactly where this came from. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, syslog. Syslog is our super secret code word of the month, syslog. And then you can, of course, put anything else into that message that you would like, as long as that word syslog is on a line by itself. Helps me find it very quickly. I'm able to get these done much faster when I'm able to find things quicker. I get hundreds and hundreds of these, so it really does make a difference. I should really work on automating that process, but I like to read through the things that you send, so I don't want to automate too much of this, and it's not that bad. So I've got a little bit of automation I do on my side that allows me to sort of pull everything out of the email, put it into an email form for you, but still allows me to read the information that's in those messages. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, put that it's the September 2022 Network Plus Study Group, and in a line by itself in the body of the message, put the word syslog. And if you don't want to put anything else in that message, that's fine too. Just put the word syslog. I'll know what it's for. I got you. I'll make sure we get that back to you. It takes me about a week or so, sometimes more, to get these emailed back to you. They don't happen immediately. So don't send it in and then 5 minutes later saying, where is it? And then 5 minutes later say, where is it again? You'll be spending a lot of time doing that because it'll be a week before I finally get around to doing that and getting those messages back to you. But that's okay. We'll make sure we get those to you eventually. If you are short of time and you need these CEUs for a particular thing that's happening very quickly, just tell me in the message and I can get it back to you quicker. Let's do another question. I know we're top of the hour, but let's fit another one in. I think we have time. This question asks, sometimes I wonder about these questions I put in here. This question asks, a network administrator needs to extend a wired Ethernet connection beyond the standard 100-meter distance. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it access point, cable modem, IPS, application proxy, or repeater? A network administrator needs to extend a wired Ethernet connection beyond the standard 100-meter distance. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it access point, cable modem, IPS, application proxy, or repeater? If you think you know the answer, there's your link on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Be able to figure out this particular question, see if you know what it is, and be able to lock these in. I don't know. Sometimes I think I make a gimme and maybe it's not a gimme. There's some other things you could do here. And I have so many questions about extending something like this. I don't want to give too much away. So have a look at that question. Lock in your answers. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock it in. Be able to do that. Oh, a lot of folks in the chat room talking about Active Directory. You know, if you're someone who's studying for the A+, you're already pretty aware of this. There's a whole section of Active Directory that is in the latest A+ certification. So if you've never worked with Active Directory before, you may want to at least look at my video on Active Directory. Yeah, what OSI layer is associated with Active Directory? We're just going to do that for everything. What OSI layer really is associated with a hurricane? I need to know. We'll have to figure that out. At this point, we're all just inside. That's what it is. I think whenever you start looking through the different options available, you got a lot that you can do on the networking side. There seems to be an answer or solution for any problem you might have on the networking side, and I think this question is a good example of where those answers might come from. Lock that question in. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Figure out the details. I did the same thing. Folks in the chat room saying, well, if you want to run Active Directory, just download an evaluation version of Windows Server and load up your own Active Directory. And that's a great way to do it. In fact, the fun of that one is that it's probably not going to work out of the box. You'll do the install, you'll restart it, you'll get it running, and then you realize this isn't working. And devices aren't connecting to Active Directory, and it can't find the Active Directory server. And then you have to work through all of the reasons that might be happening and then configure it. And once you fix your DNS, there's your hint, then you'll have Active Directory running. Let's see how you did with this question. The question asked, a network administrator needs to extend a wired Ethernet connection beyond the standard 100-meter distance. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be access point, cable modem, IPS, application proxy, or repeater? Let's see what our results are. You can see that 74% of you say it's repeater. You feel very secure in that. There's a big number there. Let's see how that worked out for you. We have 17% that say access point. That's what you would use to extend the distance. 7% said a cable modem. 2% said application proxy. And 0%, we finally got a 0% question that said IPS would be the answer. Well, if you are extending an Ethernet connection and you want to pull in a signal, regenerate the signal, and send that signal out the other side again, it's a very simple process, relatively speaking, then you're looking for a repeater. That's what you want. In fact, it's in the name. It's simply bringing the signal in, it's regenerating the signal, and sending it back out the other side. It's effectively repeating everything you send it, giving you the same thing from one end. In fact, there's not a lot of complexity with the forwarding done here. There's no MAC address lookup. There's no IP address lookup. You don't have a routing table. It's a very simple two interface. One of the interfaces is a Gazenta, and the other interface is the Gazata. So that's it. That's as complex as it gets. And of course, anything coming in the other side is also sent out the other side. It effectively is simply repeating everything from one interface to the other. That's it. In this case, this is the one that's on the screen is a repeater. Also happens to be converting the type of media you're using, but it is a repeater. It's exactly what it uses. That's right. A media converter is a repeater. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. This could have, of course, the same interface on both sides. This one has fiber on one side and copper on the other. It could, of course, have fiber on both sides, or it could have copper on both sides. This one happens to be doing repeating and converting the media at the same time, but that absolutely is a converter, and that's what you would use to take a signal that has maxed out at 100 meters and regenerate it to be able to send it another 100 meters. So that might get you through some challenges you might have to be able to do that. Does a repeater use power over Ethernet? I haven't seen any that use PoE, but there might be one. Those that are, it's obviously needs to be a powered system because it's regenerating the signal. But there might be one out there that uses PoE. Certainly possible. Pretty easy to do. Yes, you could use a switch. You could use a hub. You could use a media converter. You use almost anything to do this, but a switch is not, a switch is making forwarding decisions based on a MAC address. So technically not a repeater. Technically it's not extending the wire. Technically it's stopping the signal and then making a decision on where traffic needs to go. Now, as far as the process of regenerating the signal and sending it out another interface, there are similarities there, but under the surface, when you pull the hood up, very different engine inside of it and very different in how it operates. So that's the important part of this particular question, is you want to be sure you're using a technology that does not change any of the signal as it's going through, because that's not what we're trying to do either. Everything that we've gone through today comes directly from the exam objectives. So you should get your hands on these objectives. I talked about these earlier and how valuable they are. They tell you everything you need to know for the exam, and they really are specific to the exam you're going to take. CompTIA doesn't tend to go outside the scope of these objectives, and they're free. Did I mention that earlier? Absolutely free. Go to professormesser.com/objectives to get a link that will take you over to the CompTIA website, or simply go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. That'll be the one that gets you there. We do one of these study groups every month. Our next Network Plus study group will be on October the 12th. Come back on October the 12th, and I'll have all new Network Plus questions for you. We'll do another one of these hour of Q&A, and then, of course, another hour in our after show of me answering your questions. And, of course, as you can see, we have other study groups that are occurring in October as well. And since we are here on the 28th of September, tomorrow the 29th is our Security Plus study group. I don't tend to do them back-to-back like this, but my schedule this month was crazy. So I do one study group today for Network Plus. Tomorrow, come back for our Security Plus study group. And of course, we have one of those also in October. We aren't done, of course, even though we're finished with me asking you questions. We turn this boat around and you ask me the questions in our after show. Stick around for that. Don't forget about the Success Bundle. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess to learn more about that. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers. You don't need a discount code. You don't need a special add-on for your browser. Simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers. They're already discounted. What could be simpler than that? Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we're always here doing something. There's some craziness always going on behind the scenes. If you'd like more information on what's happening, you can find us at professormesser.com/YouTube and get your weekly pop quiz question on professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. Thanks for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the after show. Get your questions ready where we can all fight about the OSI model. I'm looking forward to it. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let's see if I can get my cameras working here. How do I get rid of that graphic? That's how we do it. Let's have a look at a few things on my side that I need to reset graphics-wise so that you can find the things you are looking for. It's time for our after show. In the after show, I tend to answer your questions. So whatever questions you have about CompTIA exams, if you have questions about technology or about life, I don't know, about anything, you're welcome to ask them. Will I answer them? Maybe. Most of the time, yes. Sometimes no, but sometimes I will. And we can talk about the details of those things. And of course, we've already got 2 or 3 or even 4 questions that have already come in, and we can certainly jump to that one. Have a look and see what your questions might be. If you are watching this on a live stream, you're obviously able to ask these questions. We obviously do not have these available If you are not on the live stream, there's a whole physics problem there. I'm working on it. We just haven't cracked it quite yet, where you can ask me questions in the future and then I can answer the question in the past. We're trying to get there. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. We'll start with the obvious one, which is I thought you were in Florida, but there's a fireplace behind you. There is a fireplace. It's a working gas fireplace. It's a real fireplace, and I turn it on all the time because Florida gets cold. It does. There are places in Florida that don't really get that cold, but there are places in Florida that get super cold. I will, of course, it's a bad example, but of course the Challenger explosion, the space shuttle, exploded because the temperature was freezing when the shuttle went up. And that's in the middle of the state, was freezing weather. Obviously not completely normal to have things ice up in that part of Florida, but it happens, and I'm north of there. So yeah, it does get cold here, and I absolutely turn that's real. That's not a green screen. It's not a Zoom background. That's a real thing. And I do turn it on, and it's so nice to have on in the studio when I'm in here working. So absolutely. Will I be impacted by the hurricane? I am in the northern part of Florida, right in the middle in Tallahassee. So no problems here. We're lucky enough that the storm will have practically no impact for what we're doing here. Obviously, I have lots of friends and relatives there in other parts of the state that will be going through a significant amount of rain and wind. So we're keeping a close eye on everything. And of course, these hurricanes can do anything. So you never know as it's creeping up. Earlier in the week, all of the models said that the hurricane was going directly over the studio, that it was coming directly for me. So a good example, it moved over that direction. So you just never know what's going to work with that. Let's talk about the big question that everyone was fighting with each other in the chat room. You should always, if you're watching this on the replay, go over to the YouTube side to watch it, because you will get the real-time chat along with the replay. So you can see what people were talking about as I was doing other things. So we had a battle going on back and forth between talking about, and this is what the beauty of, this is why OSI model was created, was so that we could all fight with each other. I'm convinced that's why we created this model. The OSI model, by the way, doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's not like I can pick up a thing and go, let me show you my OSI model that I have right here. It's not like the IT crowd. We're like, here's the internet, Jen. No, we don't. That's not the way it works. The OSI model is not a box. It's not a thing. It's not something I can hand to you. It's a model. It's a concept. It's an idea. It's not real, which lends itself to a lot of fights, as you can imagine. So that's why we're talking about specifically, here's the question. We have a network interface card. We have an Ethernet adapter. We have an Ethernet card. We have a NIC. That network interface card is associated with an OSI layer. What OSI layer is it? And that's effectively the question in the chat room, and that's what everybody was fighting over. Now, the problem I think that people get into when they try to start putting things into a specific bucket is they sort of lose concepts of the bigger picture of what we're trying to do. When we talk about defining what device or what thing and where it fits in the OSI model, we're talking about the layer of the model where this device operates. I see people get in this trap all the time. A router's connected to the network. A switch is connected to the network. A repeater is connected to the network. A hub is connected to the network. And an access point is connected to the network. The network operates at layer 1. Therefore, all 5 of those devices are layer 1 devices. Done. There you go. All finished. No, that's not how it works. When we talk about what layer is associated with a device, what we're really saying is, here's a device that has a core operation, and for that core operation, what OSI layer is at work for that core operation, for that major thing that it's doing. So for example, a router is a device that at its core makes decisions on where to forward packets based on the destination IP address inside of that packet. It's based on the IP. So the router doesn't care what the MAC address is. It doesn't even necessarily matter what type of network it was on. It could be on a serial network. It could be on a token ring network. It could be on an Ethernet network, a 100 megabit Ethernet, a gigabit, a 10 gig. You got lots of options. But the router doesn't care about all that. All the router cares about is what IP address is this going to? Let me send it to an interface that will get it a little bit closer to that particular network. That's all a router does. And because it's doing this based on that IP address, we refer to the router as a layer 3 device because IP addresses are at the layer 3 of the OSI model. A lot of people think, but it connects to the network and that signal on the network is at layer 1, therefore the router is at layer 1. Well, eventually that signal does get down to the network and eventually the router does send it across that network, but that wasn't the question. The question is, operationally, where does this device operate in the context of everything that is the OSI model? So knowing the question and defining the question that way, the ideas behind this are what operationally happens in a network interface card. What does a network interface card do? What is the foundational operation of that particular component? How does it work? Well, a network interface card receives frames from a network. Let's say it's an Ethernet card. It receives an Ethernet frame. Inside of that Ethernet frame, it examines the destination MAC address inside of that frame to determine if the frame really is intended for this device. Because if it is, it has a specific MAC address that it was sent to, and it can have a look at that to determine. It will look at the destination MAC, and it will look at its own MAC address and say, does my burned-in MAC address match the destination MAC address of this frame? And if they match, oh, good, we'll send this up to another layer to have a look at the rest of this frame to see what's inside of it. If those two MAC addresses don't match, something has been sent in to this device, and the destination MAC address, it's not a broadcast, it's not a multicast, and it's not a MAC address that's recognized, it's not the burned-in MAC address of this device, it drops that frame. It doesn't even examine it, it doesn't process it, just drops the frame. The frame is dead, it's gone by frame. That means that all of the decisions that are taking place for that network interface card, the operation of that network interface card is making forwarding decisions, in this case, a very simple forwarding decision, do I accept this frame or not? It's making that decision based on the destination MAC address inside of that frame. Therefore, a network interface card operates at OSI layer 2. That's it. That's the answer. It's not a layer 1 device simply because it touches a network. That's not how it works. That's not how we interpret operationally what the OSI model is. So that's the beauty of this. If that was the case, everything is a layer 1 device, and that's where this all breaks down. And we can all fight about the rest, and we can have a big argument over which is better or which is not, or is it layer 1 or is it layer 2? Ultimately, it's a model. It's an idea for trying to understand the way that a network operates. And it's also a way that we can communicate to other technical people in a way that we would both understand without having to go through a lot of details. Let's say that you have a router and you think that the routing table in the router, maybe it's a routing table that's been put in manually. Maybe you think there's a problem with the routing table, but you don't have access to the router. You can't look at the routing table of the router. But you're doing some tests and you're noticing that certain destinations are not getting a response. Well, then you can talk to the network team and say, I've run these tests, and it seems that anything associated with this particular IP address range is not, I'm not getting a response to that. It feels like it could be a layer 3 type issue. So immediately we're on the same place. We're like, oh, okay, layer 3. Let's have a look at the layer 3 configuration of this router and see what's inside of it and what it's doing. And that might point us towards the IP address configuration settings of an interface on the router. It might point us to a routing table. It might point us to a route redistribution. There's a lot of different layer 3 things we can look at inside of a router to make that decision. Very different if we were talking about a problem on a switch. We're talking about a problem on a switch. Obviously, we're plugging in an Ethernet cable directly to a switch. So it's layer 1, right? No, it's not. That's not how it works. What is the switch doing? The switch is making forwarding decisions based on the MAC address, the destination MAC address inside of a frame. In many ways, the switch is just a smarter, more intelligent NIC, if you want to think of it that way, because it doesn't have one interface on it. It has 32 interfaces on it. It has 16 interfaces on it. It has a lot of interfaces. So it's making a lot of forwarding decisions all based on the MAC address, that is the destination MAC address that's being received. Therefore, it's a layer 2 device. That's why we always say a switch is a layer 2 device. That's also why we say that there's no such thing as a layer 3 switch. And now you know why. Because a switch does not make forwarding decisions based on layer 3 information. It's a switch. If there is a router that you have put inside of a switch, and the router makes forwarding decisions based on IP addresses, and the switch makes forwarding decisions based on the MAC address, then you've effectively got a layer 2 router. It doesn't work, does it? So that's why you have a layer 2 switch and a layer 3 router, and ne'er the twain shall meet. There is not a switch that operates at layer 2 that makes forwarding decisions based on an IP address. There's also not a router who makes forwarding decisions based on MAC addresses. That doesn't happen. And that's why I always say it's very bad to try to explain to people, or to force people to understand the idea of a completely made up marketing term such as layer 3 switch and somehow put that into a technical certification program. The only reason we do that is because the term is used so much that people who are well established in the networking industry, they already know when you say a layer 3 switch, they already know that you mean this switch has both switching software and routing software inside of it, and it can perform either function. But that's a lot to say, so we just call it a layer 3 switch. It's really just a shortcut, if you want to think of it that way. That's what we do for those. In the chat room, the Spencer in the chat room with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Spencer. Spencer says, I passed my 1001, most recently 1002. Thanks to your videos, Spencer, you got in just under the wire. You realize this, right? For those of you that are working on your A+, you know that the 1000 series exams retire on October the 20th. That's less than a month away. October 20th. You got to get both of those done by October 20th. If you're just starting, obviously, you're probably taking the 1100 series. It's not a problem for you. Spencer, congratulations on your A+ certification. Thank you for the $5 super chat. I'll thank you right back on that. Thanks for your support of that. It does make a big difference for what we do here. And congratulations on your A+ cert. That's got to be good to have it. You've now got the cert. You beat the retirement date. So yes, Spencer says, yes, I was cutting it close. You certainly were, but you got it done. Congratulations. You had a month to spare. It wasn't even close, Spencer. You're that good. That's how good you are. Congratulations. Let's go through some other questions that folks have sent in. There were a couple of others that have come in. Why are multi-layer switches associated with bus networks? I'm not aware that they are. In fact, what bus network? Where are you finding a bus network first? And secondly, why do you believe that a multi-layer switch is associated with them? No, multi-layer switch is just another way to say a layer 3 switch. That's it. Because there's really not a layer 4 switch. Actually, there is, but we're not going to talk about that. It's a layer 3 switch is that marketing term. You're either routing or you're switching. That's it. Or you're switching or you're routing. One of those two. So probably not a bus network that you're plugging into. Where are you? I guess they're in your car. There is a bus network in your car, but that's it. There's not many bus networks anywhere else to be able to work through those. Some other questions that came through. I'm going to scroll up just a bit and go through those questions. there were some kind of test type questions. Let's go through these. Oscar asked, does CompTIA give partial credit for performance-based questions? And it's a common question. If you look at many performance-based questions, you can have one that's a matching question. And the matching question, you might get 2 right and you might get 2 wrong. Well, do you get 50%? Or do you not get 50%? It's hard to know exactly. Fortunately, or maybe not fortunately, CompTIA has created a frequently asked questions document about performance-based questions. This should clear everything up for us. We will know everything about performance-based questions and their grading after reading through this, because they put on here very specifically, is partial credit given if I answer part of a PBQ correctly? And now they've cleared it all up for us. They've said there may questions, I think they meant there may be questions for which partial credit is offered. However, exam questions and their scoring are confidential, so no further information can be provided regarding which questions may offer partial credit. Now we all cleared that up, didn't we? See how easy that was? We effectively were told, maybe, maybe not. We might give you partial credit or we might not give you partial credit. I will tell you, though, from my perspective, you will never know. That's the final version of this. When you get your results from the exam, the results do not give you a question-by-question breakdown on whether you got a question right or question wrong. You will never know how they graded your exam. You will never know if you got partial credit for a question or not. Therefore, it really doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether they give you partial credit or not. You have no control over it. You have no ability to make that decision. So that's why at least they told us at least we know, and there's the thing that's going to be helpful with this, at least we know there's a chance, there's a possibility when looking at these that the question we have could give you partial credit. So at least that solves a question in our brains that, is this an all or nothing situation? Well, it might not be. We might get a couple of extra points for this. So we'll never know, but we'll throw it in there and be able to work through that. So let's see other questions that come through. Here's another common one, especially on the Network Plus study group. Hey, JH in the chat room says, hey, Professor, recently passed Security Plus using your content. Congratulations. Got accepted into a Cisco pre-apprenticeship program. Congratulations again. Does the CCNA hold more value than the Network Plus? Well, it certainly does for Cisco. If you're getting into a Cisco pre-apprenticeship program, I would say they'd probably be pretty high up on getting a CCNA. I think they love the idea of anyone getting a CCNA. The reality is, though, a lot of people do try to compare a CCNA and Network Plus. They're not comparable at all. These are two completely different exams with an approach towards two completely different end games. The Network Plus is an entry-level exam. It's designed to give you an overview of networking, a very broad overview, and in some cases, more specific overview. But most of it is sort of a higher-level overview of a lot of different types of networking topics. The CCNA is not an entry-level exam. It's an intermediate exam, certainly a higher level than Network Plus. And I think a lot of people want to be able to say the CCNA is better. Well, the CCNA is certainly a higher level certification, but that doesn't necessarily make it better. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you were going for a job and you were wanting to have a job working at a help desk, that entry-level position. Maybe it's a network operations center, a NOC. Maybe they say, we need somebody working at the NOC who's that first-level person. They can take phone calls. They can understand the networking technology people are talking about. They can maybe fix minor things or do some simple pings or trace routes. But that's it. That's what the person at the help desk is going to do. And then you say, oh, but wait, I don't. And they might even say, do you have a Network Plus certification? You go, I don't have a Network Plus. I have the CCNA. I have a much higher level certification than a Network Plus. I can set up a Cisco switch. I can set up a Cisco router. I can work at the command lines. I can troubleshoot at the command lines. I can interpret data that's seen at the command lines. I can reset a system after losing the password. I have extensive knowledge of the operation of these Cisco routers and switches. And then they will say, well, you're not a good fit for us. Thanks for coming in. Wait, I have a CCNA. I know more than a Network Plus. Yes, but you're interviewing for an entry-level help desk position in NOC. And they know immediately, you already know about routing tables. You already know how to set static routes. You already know about configuring switches. You know about resetting the CAM. You know about resetting the entire system. You're going to be so bored at this job. It's not a good fit for you. You need to go find a job that's a better fit for you. Even though you have no industry experience, there's nothing you've ever done in networking, but because you told them you had a CCNA, they automatically decided you're intermediate level. This is an entry-level job. This is not a good fit. That happens. That's a real thing. That is not something that is a made-up idea. The idea of you don't want to oversell your capabilities to someone. If the job is for these particular features and functions, you should tell them. But maybe you have a CCNA and you're trying to get that entry-level position. You don't have to tell them. Now, if it comes up in conversation and they say, what we really want are people to have their CCNA certification, well, then that would be different. But in many cases, that's not the case. You want to be very careful when you work through those two different scenarios of saying, I have a Network Plus, I have a CCNA. They're different certifications intended for a different end game. They're a different situation. So that happens. Everybody's now fighting over the idea of a layer 3 switch. I'm glad I was able to get that going for everyone. Switching is at layer 2, routing is at layer 3. That's all you need to know. Everything else is just marketing speak. That's the idea. And working through it. Let's other questions. Let's have a look at these. There are multi-layer switches that can operate on layer 2 or layer 3. No. There are boxes that inside of them have both a switch and a router. The switch operates at layer 2. The router operates at layer 3. Period. End of story. If you start telling people this switch operates at layer 2 and layer 3, that's first incorrect because switches don't operate at layer 3. But it's also confusing to someone who's new in the industry. So I think it's important to explain why multi-layer switches aren't real. And then once you understand why they aren't real, it's important to explain why they actually exist and how they are real. So it's sort of a double situation we're trying to do. We're trying to tell you the right way to do it, and then we're trying to tell you how the marketing people explain it. That's really what it is. So so everybody, so a multi-purpose, now we've got a new one, a multi-purpose switch, not a thing, is a layer 3 switch that does routing at layer 2. I'm glad we were able to get this all straightened out. Thank you for just very clearly taking everything that I just said and saying the opposite thing. That's perfect. Jamie in the chat room with a $10 super chat says, hey, PM, recently passed my A+. Want to say thank you. I could not have done it without your content. To everyone else, the practice exams and notes from Professor Messer are invaluable. Thank you. I don't have practice exams for Network Plus yet. Going to be working on those. But there's a plan to get some done. Hopefully the plan will come to fruition. That's the idea. But thank you, Jamie, for the $10 super chat. And congratulations on your A+. I do, of course, have practice exams for A+, which is the thing that Jamie passed. Congratulations on your new certification. And my question is, did you do the 1000 series exam or the 1100 series exam? I'm really interested as we get closer to the retirement date of October 20th. I'm really interested in what people are taking. I'd love to know. Also want to flip over to the $10 super chat from Aaron. Aaron says, I passed Security Plus thanks to you this summer. I started my new job last week with an amazing company. This is great. That's what we're looking for. Aaron says, what you're doing changes lives. Thank you. That's the goal. That's if we had a mission statement, and I hate mission statements, but I made one. Our mission statement is we want to get you a job or get you a better job. That's it. I tried to work the word synergy in there somewhere, but it just didn't work out. I just want you to get a job or get a better job. That's our mission statement. So if you can get a job or get a better job, mission accomplished. We did it. congratulations. Thank you, Aaron, for the $10 super chat. Congratulations both on your Security Plus and for the new job. That is great news. Thank you for letting me know too. That those types of things that just make my day. I get to leave here and then go talk to Mrs. Professor Messer and tell her all these great stories, and we just have a great time talking about all of that. It's fantastic. Let's see if we got an answer. Jamie said I did the 1001 and the 1002. Okay, so you got that. The version that we got in was the one that is retiring October the 20th. You may be even saying, why are people taking these exams that are like 3 years old? They've been out for 3.5 years now. Why are they still taking them? Well, that's because all of the training materials that can help you with the exam have been out for 3.5 years. All of the people that took that exam all took it and know exactly what's on the exam. They can tell you the things that are important, the things you could focus on. There's books and training materials and videos and questions and labs. All have been built over the 3-year time frame. There are still some publishers who say we're going to produce an A+ course for the newest version that came out in April that still haven't put it onto the market yet. That's how long it takes for some of these publishers to get these things just to the market. We started putting ours out in March, of course. The real challenge you have is just putting these courses. They take months to create, months to put together. A lot of moving parts, a lot of things happening. So it does take. And I don't write a book. If I had to write an A+ book along with the videos and the practice exams and the course notes, it would take me years to get this done. I don't know how they do it when they produce these books and get them out in 6 months. I have no idea how they do that. I guess they go into a dark room with coffee and they just don't come out till it's finished. That's what you'd have to do. Not my gig, not my thing, not what I want to do. So I'll just stick with the videos. Thank you very much. And working that. I'm glad some folks were able to get that new A+ or the old A+ version in before the retirement date. I think that's great. And trust me, there will be people taking their second exam on the last day it's available. It happens every time because we're human. We talked about this in the pre-show a little bit. We're just human beings. We wait until the last minute, and then suddenly it's on top of us, and we have to, quickly, hurry, kind of thing. It happens. It's just sort of normal. So we can't really get rid of that. But if you're someone who is just starting your studies for A+, go study the newer stuff. I think you'd be okay. Then you don't have to worry about the clock. I don't know. I couldn't do it. I could not study for something that was about to expire, is about to be retired. I just can't cram all of that into a single time frame and still maintain a good blood pressure. There's too much stress associated with that for me. Other people thrive on this. Other people will set a time frame. They'll start studying, but they'll buy their voucher the first day they study and set and book a date for the exam into the future. And they'll go, okay, I'm taking the exam on this day. Let's go. And that's what they use as their motivation to get to there. So whatever works for you, I think that's great. Figure out the one that works best for you, and you'd be in good shape. I think that's the key. Let's see what other questions may have come through. Moglet in the chat room. Professor Messer passed both my Network Plus and, as of yesterday, Security Plus. That's 2 big ones down. Your videos were of tremendous help. Many thanks. You're very welcome, and congratulations on both your Network Plus and your Security Plus, both challenging exams in different ways. And both of them are good to have in your pocket. I always say that Network Plus, of A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, if you were to look at the job postings out there, Network Plus probably has, or networking positions are probably a smaller number of positions available population-wise per capita. But I find it's more valuable. I think the networking topics are more valuable in IT. I go into a lot of these IT places, and they are trying to get the help desk people ITIL certified, ITIL, the IT Infrastructure Library. And the IT Infrastructure Library is a certification or a knowledge that is really built for the director level. It's about bringing in the business and technology and blending them together and the strategies. There's a whole bunch of, It's really a high-level cert. And for some reason, companies with managers who had to take the ITIL, they say, this was good information because they're a director. Of course it was good information. It was built exactly for you. And they say, it was so good for me that all the help desk people should take this, that everybody in IT should be ITIL certified. Like they completely missed the whole point of the ITIL certification. The irony there is, of course, palpable. But the point of this is that now help desk people have to now get certified in something they will never use. Now, granted, in the world of corporate bureaucracy, that is sort of a normal day. That's sort of what we do. The manager shows up, yeah, well, we have to do this because it came from upstairs and we got to do, okay, we'll just get it done, and we all do it. It's silly. It's a waste of time. It's an enormous waste of money. It doesn't get you anything useful, and certainly not going to help you in your position and trying to get a job or get a better job. However, networking is one of those skills that works across the entire range of IT. I wish that we could swap out ITIL and put in any type of networking knowledge you would like. It doesn't have to be Network Plus, but let's say it is. Let's plug in Network Plus instead of ITIL. Now you're learning something and a set of skills that you will use regardless of where you are in IT, and these are skills you will use the rest of your career. That's how valuable those networking skills are, and that's how often they show up. So I wish we did more. I don't want to call it right sizing. I wish we did more right learning. I wish we did more learning of the things that were appropriate for what we were trying to accomplish. But like anything else, big companies are big companies, and there's a lot of disconnects that happen once you get into a big company. And that just happens to be one of those disconnects. And we sort of deal with that. If you're somebody who's in that position where you're in the help desk and now they've required you to do ITIL, go do it. You know, maybe one day you'll be a director and you can use that information. So in some ways, it's not completely worthless. It's just mostly worthless. I think the goal is, even if they do that, go grab a Network Plus book and read up on some of those things. Would you like to be CCNA certified? Go do that. I don't care where you get the knowledge from. I don't care what you do with it, but that would be a great place to go for those. I think that's always good. It really is a bit of a disconnect. Beaver in the chat room is not too far off that you feel like HR is just disconnected with IT professionals. I think everybody is disconnected with IT primarily because IT is a mystery. The IT, information technology, isn't it just a bunch of people programming? Isn't that what it is? And I think a lot of you are probably on the same place that I am, that you're an IT professional. You've been learning, or at least maybe you've even got a job working in IT. You go to a family gathering, and people are going, "Hey, what are you doing these days? What type of job you working on?" Like, it's hard to explain to people. Well, I'm managing a switch network for a corporation. A switch now, like a light switch. Is that what you mean? Like, it goes in a weird direction. But how do you? Well, I work with computers. That was my go-to. I work a lot with computers. And they say, well, I got a problem with my computer. I'm trying to get it running, and I got all these pop-ups. You think you can fix that for me? I go, well, yes, but I can't because I got other stuff going on. Then you suddenly become the help desk person for your family, and then you start drinking a lot, and then everything goes downhill. So my recommendation would be to keep it as technical as possible. What do you do? Oh, I manage a switch network using blah blah. You just go into the details. Well, I manage the certificates for the. Just go into whatever you can. Something where they have no idea what you do. Like, oh, okay, gotcha. So you guys been out hunting lately? So you just changed they changed the topic because they don't want to talk about whatever that crazy technical nonsense was that you just talked about. That's what we do. That's the challenge. The thing I think a lot of people mistake, or they perhaps don't think about when they're getting into technology, is just how broad it is, just how many things you can do. So HR They have a job. Their job is to get qualified applicants to a hiring manager. That's one of their many jobs, but that's a big one. And during the hiring process, that's a major thing for HR. We don't have time to do that. We're handling our switch and routed networks. We are building out a new VPN configuration. We got a new facility we're trying to put in. We got to build out a new data center. We're moving stuff to the cloud. We got things going on. I don't have time to go chase resumes. But HR, they're perfect. That's what they do. They're good at it. They have a process for getting these resumes in whatever way they can, interpreting what's there, and then providing that interpreted information to the hiring manager. Sometimes it can work perfectly, but obviously the HR department, they're not technical. They don't know that a network interface card operates at OSI layer 2. They don't know that a layer 3 switch isn't real. They have no idea about those things. They don't understand that gigabit Ethernet works just fine over category 5. They don't know. But they get all of these technical things on a piece of paper, and they try to look for the things that look familiar or they've told to look for on the piece of paper. And if it fits what they've been told, they can then provide that piece of paper to the hiring manager. So they're doing the best they can, but it's actually the same in every part of the company. The marketing department doesn't know what you do. The folks that are in shipping and receiving have no clue. Accounting department, they don't know. They don't handle the scale of technology. Now, some of them do, but most do not. They don't really get that. So one of the things that I try to tell people in technology is just to work with them. Always find a way that you can be the translator, that you can translate between the technical world and the world of everyone else. But you have to put yourself into their world to understand what it is that they may or may not understand. So it's useful if you can make that transition, but it's a hard one. It's a difficult one. You got to practice it with people. You got to really understand, where am I over talking with the technical? And if you've ever been in a meeting with folks, and it's a meeting between a lot of different departments, IT has been invited, and then you've been asked, I've been in this meeting many times, and then they're talking about a new imaging system, and they turn to you and say, is this something that we can do on our existing server? And if you have to be careful about how you answer these things. If you start saying, well, we can, but we're going to need to switch out the RAM because this is going to need a lot of throughput, and we need something that can be a double or triple buffer. We need to somehow, if we can upgrade the CPU, that would be good. Do we have hard drives in that server, or is it SSDs? Do we need to convert to SSD? That's only going to be $10,000. Do you want to convert to SSD? And they're like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. And why would I spend $10,000 on it? Is it worthwhile? They don't even know. So you've already jumped in 2 sentences. You've already lost the room. So you kind of have to approach this in a very different way. And if you're able to be that universal translator between the IT world and the rest of the universe, you actually have a lot of more options available for jobs. There are jobs out there that's what you do. I used to have a job where my job was to take very technical things and explain it to people in journalism. So all of those articles that you always read and you think in the article, well, they got that completely wrong. I don't know where they thought that. They got it wrong because whoever they were talking to was telling them information that they weren't able to understand. So that's why if you can make that jump, if you can make that translation between the two, you may find that there's a lot of other options available for you technically. The one thing that's kind of breaks down, where it ultimately becomes an issue, is when other people get to make decisions about what you need to be doing in your job. And we've seen this in, most recently, we've seen it in government work, where the government says everyone should learn to code. That was something we saw a number of years ago. Everyone should learn to code. No, everyone should not learn to code. That's a horrible idea. Hardly anyone should be coding, and certainly not everyone. But they felt that was the way. That's computers. When you talk about a computer, it's a programmer, right? Programmers, that's what a computer does. You program it, and then you move the mouse around, and then it does something on the screen. So if everybody could learn to program, everybody would have all these jobs, and we'd be able to anyway, that's sort of the idea. And I'm not talking about any particular. This is not a political statement. Both, and not even, I won't even say both parties. All parties say exactly the same thing when it comes to technology. They don't understand it, and they think that you should just do more programming. When in reality, there's a whole side of technology dealing with information technology that has nothing to do with building an application. Nothing. Zero. So spending time learning how to code will not help you keep a file server up and running. It won't help you troubleshoot the network, and it won't help your data be more secure. That's the idea. That's the thing. It's remarkable, isn't it? And I've spoken about this in other study groups and how we just don't do a very good job at training on the IT side. We don't do a very good job at preparing people for the world of information technology, even though it's an enormous part of what we do in technology is the IT side. It's a weird world. Now, I'm not complaining because I have a channel on YouTube that does IT training. And if everybody else did it better, I might not have a job. So I guess that's okay. I'll just find what they're not doing well, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And we'll see how that all works out. So far, so good, right? We're just going to, I say right, I'm saying that to myself. That was not a question. That was more of a hypothetical. That's the idea. Hey, Professor, I'm trying to set up better internet in my house. Who isn't? Is there a device with good balance between range and speed? I wish I had one sitting here. I would show it to you. It's called a cable. It's called an Ethernet cable. My old device was good speed. Mesh device is good range, but way too slow. And that is sort of the problem with these. That is kind of the newer generation of wireless access points in our home. They want you to put in a meshed connection in your home. And I think for most people, it's good. It's fine. Because I'm just checking emails from time to time. That's all I'm doing. I do the crossword. I get on there and I do the Sudoku, and it works fine. Mesh is good. But for those of you like me that want multi-gig download speeds, you want fast streaming, you are constantly going to speedof.me or your local speed check to see how fast are we running today. You know, you want it to run as fast as possible. Mesh isn't going to work for you. Mesh is not your jam at all. But as with most things, there's always a downside. And what I think most people should be doing if your home is so large that you put an access point on one side and you can't reach the access point from the other side of the house. I say so large, that's most houses really. Certainly ranch style homes, when you're not going up, you're going sort of side to side, you can very easily do this. The problem, or the thing that you may want to consider doing, is putting access points at both sides of the house, but that means you would need to run a cable to the other side. Now, can that be challenging? Oh, yes. Can it be expensive? Not too bad. In fact, I have hired in the past in another facility, I hired an electrician to run 2 Cat5 cables. Maybe it was Cat 6 at the time. But 2 Cat5e cables from one side of my house to the other, because I couldn't get up there. I knew I would come right through the ceiling. And I'm not sure about your relationships. Mrs. Professor Messer does not like me being on a ladder. She does not especially not up in the attic where you can very easily come through the attic. No, that's not where she wants me to be. So in her mind, it was well worth the money to have someone else attempt to kill themselves by going into the attic and running the wire for us. But that worked great. And we were able to do that. I since have moved to a different place. And when we moved to the place, there was all the walls were open. So we said, oh, run the cables, run the Cat 6 now. So I have Cat 6 everywhere. Everything's wired because I know I want to be in a room and plug in a wired connection and not have to worry about interference or the wireless network not working properly or whatever it is, so that I can run that speed test every day and see how it's running. It can be a little bit of a challenge. You can, of course, do it yourself. You can buy the cable relatively inexpensively on Amazon or tons of other places online. I've got some here. I just bought 1,000 feet and used 100. I got connectors. I've got the crimpers, and you very quickly learn how to do it. You check videos, you get the proper tools, you get the proper snips, you get the proper crimps, you get the proper connectors, and you make it all work. And eventually it does work. How come I prefer copper over fiber? Fiber is absolutely viable these days. It's come down in price so that you could put it in your home and be able to work through it, but it's more expensive. It is more expensive than copper. It's significantly more expensive, relatively speaking, than copper. And you can easily spend twice as much. And of course, at both ends of this, you have to plug into fiber connectors that are on a switch or some other device. Those are relatively expensive, much more expensive than copper connections these days. The prices have come down significantly, but it's still more expensive. So why would you put in something that's more expensive that doesn't get you any additional throughput? And in most cases, I think you run a Cat 5e cable in a house, you're gig, and you're done. I would like to, in my studio, I've planned for 10 gig connections. So I've got a 10 gig switch, I've got 10 gig connectivity, but all over copper because it's much less expensive. That's the idea. And of course, when you pull the fiber the wrong way, you turn it the wrong way, you've now damaged the fiber, and then you have to start the whole thing over again. So that's the whole thing. I think if you're ever working through this, that's the goal with this, is to really break through and understand, why are you working so hard at putting in a technology that you'll never realize the value of when you could have done it much simpler and much less expensive and have exactly the same throughput. That's why. And you're right. It's kind of fun to work with fiber. I've worked with fiber enough. I'm good. I don't need it in my house. There have been situations, though, where I wanted to have a network connection over a very extended distance, and I thought I'll run fiber for that. But then when I did the math, it's 50 meters. It's 60 meters. It's 70 meters. I'm still not even close to the max. So that's why. That's the reason for it. Now, yeah, you might have something outside. Maybe you don't want to deal with grounding, and you don't want to have to deal with lightning, and you don't have to deal with those scenarios. Well, fiber's a really good example for that. I'm not saying never use fiber. I'm saying you would use it where you were getting the value from it. But if I'm just running it in the attic, just run copper. Something happens to it, I'll run another copper cable. In fact, if you're running copper, you're probably running 2 or 3 at a time because you're smart. So if something happens to one of those, you can use the other side of it, which just happened to me. I have lost cables between buildings. I had a lightning strike in my current office. That lightning strike took out tons of equipment and tons of copper in the ground. So had I run fiber in the ground, that connection would still be there. Now, fortunately, I had multiple copper connections in the ground. It took out one of them, and I simply moved everything over to the other one, and we haven't had a lightning strike yet since then. This is Florida. You're going to get hit by lightning, and it's going to take out some systems. You just have to prepare for it. Swooping Bird has one that I've not heard before, and that's saying something. Swooping Bird says, I've read that cat cables, are you referring to cats? Or are you referring to copper cables? So I've read that copper cables with high throughput can be a fire hazard with heat. I love this. With heat being conducted. What heat? What are these? Maybe these are really cats. Maybe that's what's happening here. Don't use actual cats on your network. If you had to take anything away today, that's what I think you should take. Do not use actual cats to do networking. And that's not what we mean. Cat is a shortcut for category. It doesn't mean a kitty cat. So that's why. It's the new Golden Retriever network coming to you from the idea. No cables. There is no heat conducted through an Ethernet cable. It does not get hotter as you put more data through it. Doesn't work that way. And no, there's no fire hazard on a cable for Ethernet. No, but I love the idea of this, by the way. I love that that's a thing because it's so far off of what physics is. Nope. Oh, and I'm absolutely with you, Swooping Bird. That's what they say on Reddit. I am totally there with you then, because I read that stuff all the time, and it's fantastic. In fact, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because now I can use that all the time now. Did you know the people on Reddit said this, that the higher, I think this is the problem online, of course, is that the person who put that in Reddit, they knew that that wasn't right. They intentionally put that there to make people think that that's what was going on. That's what I'm fighting. That's the problem on the internet. That's what I'm trying to, and that's why when I tell people there's no such thing as a layer 3 switch, they immediately think I'm one of those trolls from the Reddit. And then you try to explain to people that putting 568A on one side and 568B on the other side is not a crossover cable. That messes them up. I say these things. I really need to do videos of them so I can just point to the video and say, here's the debunking video that explains why that is and is not that way. It's interesting. 568A and 568B have a completely different background than the background of how we decided to do crossover cables, and yet those somehow managed to get hooked together. And it's an interesting story how that happened, but it's an even more interesting story on how it's very clear that isn't the case anymore, and yet people still use that as an example. It's difficult because networking is it's a relatively technical field compared to other things within IT. You're really looking at very technical things and working through really, in some cases, complex mathematical technical issues. You get into IP addressing and IPv6 and routing tables and route redistributions and NAT and PAT, and there's moving parts everywhere. And it can be very complicated to take these very complex problems and try to break them down to solve them. And so I understand why when you get a shortcut like 568A and 568B makes a crossover cable, and then you do that, you put 568A on one side and 568B and you plug it in, and it doesn't go at gigabit speeds, and you're wondering, what have I done? Why isn't this working? Why is this not a crossover cable? They told me that was a crossover cable, and then I did it, and I plugged it in, and now it's not a gigabit crossover cable. It doesn't even work. There's not even a signal. This cable's dead. Why? And we have to sort of unwrap why the internet said that to begin with, and why the internet continues to say it, even though it's not really real. There is a story there, and it's an interesting story. I just haven't put together the video on that. But that's very good. That's just one of the many examples. I have 4 or 5 of those videos I could just make right now on layer 3 switches don't exist, and 568A and B is not a crossover cable, and category 5 works just fine for gigabit, and here's why. And the engineers agree, and here's why. And it is old info, and it sort of should never have been compared that way. 568A and 568B for 100 megabit Ethernet coincidentally is identical to an Ethernet crossover cable. It doesn't make a crossover cable. It just so happens that if you were to combine those things together, which, by the way, you should never do, but if you did, it happens to have coincidentally the same pinouts as a 100 megabit and 10 megabit Ethernet crossover cable. That's what that is. But it doesn't work at gig speeds. Once we started using all 4 pair, that whole shortcut doesn't work anymore. So that's the shortcut for you. Nope, don't have to do a video now. We're done. Thanks. That was easy. That's the story. The determination on what a crossover cable is and how it works is determined by the IEEE. The determination on what wire colors you use in an Ethernet connection are the ANSI EIA 568 specs. 2 completely different organizations that have nothing to do with each other. Well, that effectively have nothing to do with each other. And that's why combining 568A and B doesn't define a crossover cable, because it never did. That's the short answer for a long problem. And there's more to that story. There's a whole history there that's you could find very or not interesting at all, but there is an interesting history there with how cables started being used. What did we do before we decided 568A and B? Who determined what the colors were before that? Because somebody did. So who was it, and why did they color them that way? And why did we use those colors? And did we use those colors on A and B? Yes, we did. And why did we do it that way? There's a whole story there that I quite honestly have tried to put together in more detail. It's very difficult to get that history because it's a history of things that occurred prior to the internet existing. So that's a real challenge. When it really comes down to it, the answer for a lot of these things, it's the military, it's the government. Ultimately, that's the only people who could afford technology before there was technology, was the government, specifically military, and the large phone companies. The phones were technology. That was as technical as we got back in the day. Before there were computers, before there were smartphones, before there was a computer you could have in your home, your phone was the most technical thing in your house. And they were phones, they were wired phones that would be on the wall, where you had to dial the number with, like this, 9972200. That was how you dialed things. It took forever to call someone. The rotary phones were delightful, but that was the technology. That was the level of technology we used, which was DC power, relays, and some type of automation on the back end that could connect those together. And that's what we used. It was not solid state at all, but it worked like a champ. But think of that technology. That's what started this whole nonsense of Ethernet crossover cables. That right there. So that should give you an idea of how convoluted these standards, how it ever comes to fruition, how we ever get from an idea of how to do something into a document that states this is exactly how it should always be done. It all started with those phones and somehow found its way into Ethernet networking at high speeds. It's almost like CW. It's almost like Morse code. It's that close, but not quite. We don't get to go back that far. So at least there was voice communication we can base that on. So there's a little bit there. It's remarkable, though. And we even still see some of this in VoIP and other technologies, too, and the way we put them together. That's just sort of how it goes. Well, that brings us another hour, the end of another hour. I think that's a perfect place to stop with rotary phones. If you're here for the technology, I'm bringing it with the rotary phone conversation. Thank you for being here. Thanks for everything that you do throughout the month. When we're not doing a live stream, we still get your cards and letters. Your messages come through on the Contact Us link. We love hearing about your triumphs and the things that you're doing with your studies. If there's anything we can do to help along those lines, please, please, please let us know. There's always a Contact Us link at the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and you're welcome to use it anytime. Thanks for being here. Come back tomorrow. We've got a Security Plus study group tomorrow. We do the whole thing again, except we talk about security the whole time and how there's no such thing as a layer 3 switch. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.